if you're presumed to be world-class in one category, you're assumed to be far, far, far above average in all the rest. And it still generates Gem Pop leads. I am hyper specific about who's going to win following this weekend based on all the things I learned. And I hope it helped people.
Now we're ready. Eardrums, activate. Hello and welcome to Gym World Worldwide, the #1 fitness business podcast based on vibes. With me today is my partner, my friend, Mateo Lopez, sporting 2 mustache figures behind him, a mustache dog and also a mustache taco cake. So impeccable vibes, sir, and impeccable shirt and impeccable hat. And with us today, also sporting more all black vibes, it is our friend Pete DePuis of Cressey Sports Performance. How are you today?
You could have deliberately messed up Cressey at least.
I mean, that's easy. Yeah. How would you do that?
Cressey is one
Cressey.
I hear. Cressey from time to time.
Cressey
And most people drop the second E when they're guessing how to spell Cressey in our inbox. I'll tell you guys a story on last names. A couple years back, this is an interesting story. You said, what should we talk about? I said, I don't know. Then this came to me. In 2017 or 18, I was asked to be a consultant on a show called Small Business Revolution. And the gist was they go to small towns like Small Town USA, where there's like a dilapidated main street. Yeah. And basically they infuse a little bit of money and wisdom into improving local business. And in theory, just reinvent the town. And they had Robert Herjavec attached to it. So he was the name, Mr. Shark Tank.
That's like the least rich shark, right? He's the poorest shark.
Wow.
But he was considerably richer than I and continues to be. And he was the face of this show. And it was season 2. And in season 2, they decided they were going to bring in some specialists. And one of the businesses, this was just outside of Philly where this season was taking place, was a boxing and fitness facility. So they had a little weight room and a boxing gym, and they were not doing great business, but they were going to fix that one. And one of their producers, found me on the internet putting out blogs about owning a gym. And they invited me down. They put me on the show. I went down for 2 different days of filming. You go into Hulu and find episode God knows what of season 2 of Small Business Revolution. You will find me pronounced as Peter DePuis in the interview because they covered all their bases except for asking one of their specialists how to pronounce their last name. And so I am till the end of time mispronounced on that platform. And it's the only television show I've been on. So I can tell you it stuck with me.
Dude, I noticed your last name. Wow.
I noticed in Riverside, he didn't put his last name. He just went with Pete. Yes. He didn't want to talk about it. The one thing he didn't want to talk about is last name.
It's like a Madonna move. Like it's Pele.
Yes. Yes.
There can only be one
hit me with the questions as it relates to that experience.
Well, just I guess my main question is, I've been watching The Curse, which is a fictionalized show, but it goes into kind of like what it takes to produce one of these. And I'm so curious as to like how manufactured is it? Like how manufactured are the emotions, the things you're being fed? Like, okay, ask him about this, and like ha 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 ha, and then and like manufacturing some little conflict between the 2 hosts. Like from what I understand, it's all pretty controlled, but someone on the inside, just wanted to know if you had an inside look.
Well, I haven't watched it since probably 2017, so I can't remember exactly how long the episode was, but let's say it was one of those like 23 to 25 minute variety type deals. And I probably was shown on the screen for somewhere in like the 3 to 5 minute range. And I only spent probably a total of maybe 8 hours in the presence of these people spread over 2 days. And a good chunk of it was doing headshots and promotional type stuff like that. And so time in Herjavec's presence was probably in the vicinity of 2 hours. There was never a single moment where they coached us up on what to talk to each other about. In fact, it was very clear that he showed up and was just going to wing it. He knew nothing about their business. He showed up 5 to 10 minutes before they were ready to hit go. They slapped some mics on us or in our general vicinity. They made sure the lighting was good for me sitting next to him. And they were just like, hey, sprint. And so I had no coaching whatsoever, but there also wasn't a significant amount of a kind of an emotional component or dynamic in the shots I was in. What they seemed to really eat up was how flabbergasted I was by some of the decisions that were being made in the space.
Yes. Yes. It's like, this is so bad. Oh my God. How could you do it this way? Yeah. But that's good TV.
They intelligently got video when I didn't realize I was being recorded. So they did get my authentic reaction to some of the things they were considering. For example, let's say this guy's space was 3,000 to 4,000 square feet. And there was about 5,000 square feet of vacant space adjacent to his. And it was a hellhole. And I remember we were probably 2/3 of the way through recording, and he's like, oh yeah, I didn't tell you guys, I have this big idea and I'm getting close with the landlord, and we're already done talking about his business. And he's like, let me come show you something. And they follow us with the camera. And he's like, I think I'm going to sign a lease on this, and we're going to more than double the space, like in the next 6 months. And we all look around and we're like, holy shit.
You have so much unutilized space.
We're like, you're operating at like 32% of capacity, and you've got 2x the staff you need, and you have no idea where you're going to generate leads from. And you think that, going to well in excess of 2x your existing footprint is the move here. And he was so proud of it. And there was a moment in that episode where you see me kind of give the like, holy shit, I'm not comfortable with this move vibe. And they were recording it and I didn't think they were, and it made the show. And
that's the good stuff. You got to be always, cameras are always rolling. Mics are always hot.
They were.
What were some other things that were wrong with this? Like, what other things did they ask you? Like, what were the nuggets you gave or tried to give?
Well, let's qualify as to why Pete was selected to give advice. I don't think that, So for those listening, we're 7 minutes into the show now. Pete has been on the show before, but it was in the very early days of the show before anybody listened to it. So
pre-audience.
Pre-audience. He was a beta tester on the guest side, and so
I wasn't on that show, but I do remember John and Mark Fisher were shirtless for no reason for that episode.
This is true.
So,
this is
fun
true.
fact: if you want to go look back in the archives, you can get a little taste over there.
It was only awkward for me.
It's everyone who talks with me and Mark at the same time. That's what it feels like. That's a common reaction. So Pete is Eric Cressey's business partner. He is the business guy behind the empire. He is an 18-year veteran of the industry. He has business endeavors with other important people. Are you still working with Sahil? Is that still a thing?
I would say we're just really longtime friends who talk shop extensively about what's going on in our existing projects. Sahil's been deep in the weeds with a book manuscript, which he submitted in the last 3 weeks, his final edition. And in Q1 of 2025, he's going to go live with what I presume will just open as a New York Times bestseller and then live there for a while because he's so strategic about it. And our business dealings have really just been me asking endless questions about that while we train together once every 6 to 8 weeks when he comes home and hangs out. So we're not working on anything actively right now.
And Sahil is, he's just like a content creator with millions of followers. But before that, he was in high finance, went to Stanford. It's like a very pedigreed dude.
Before that, he was a 17-year-old screwing around in my gym.
Exactly. That's well, we'll get to that. And you write every sometime. You are you produce content whenever you feel like it, and you have a little audience from doing that. And and now I know you are a ex-reality TV star.
This is so true. I need an IMDb page is what I need.
Yes. And part-time business guru. So that is Pete's background for those of you who have made it 7 minutes into this. And Yeah, I think your superpower, which I've said before, is you just like are a magnet for people who are going places. And I don't know if this is something that you've curated deliberately or it just was kind of an accident, but like maybe we can start with like how you met Eric and what the deal with Cressey is, how you ended up being the business guy for this gym empire.
Sure, and we can pretend that I'm also going places. That'd be fun. Not like these people.
I don't want to lie to the audience.
That's fair. That's fair. But I am, not to brag, I am into my second edition of Gym World, and that doesn't happen for everybody. So
no, it does not.
Here we are.
It does not.
That's true. We're going to have T-shirts, jackets. SNL has jackets, robes. So we'll have that.
I will be patiently waiting by the mailbox for the next couple of weeks. To your point, yeah, I've unintentionally or intentionally stumbled into some friendships with surprisingly connected, accomplished professionals in a couple of different realms. Eric Cressey and I were randomly assigned college roommates our freshman year in the fall of '99, which shouldn't be a surprising number since you said I've been doing this for 18 years. There was about a 4-ish year window between our undergraduate graduation and us starting this business, during which time I did a little bit of dabbling in corporate, and I also got an MBA. Eric is now the director of player performance for the New York Yankees. Pretty cool role, pretty cool title since we function in the baseball space. And he is co-founder of this operation that we run in 2 places, Massachusetts and Florida. Sahil was a client on day 1 in our space because Eric was independent contracting out of a strength and conditioning facility about a half hour away for somewhere in the vicinity of, we'll say, 9 to 18 months after graduating his graduate program and us ultimately starting this. That was this tight little window. And Sahil was one of the handful of people who came with him when we opened the new spot. I watched him go from immature, talented young athlete to Stanford student who hyper overachieved on a baseball field, but also had the self-awareness to know that baseball wasn't the long-term play. And he also managed to line up a academic advisory situation with Condoleezza Rice while he was there. And he realized there are places to go in conjunction with that network that have a much higher ceiling than pursuing professional baseball with a 92 to 93 mile per hour fastball from the right, which is not a good thing in this day and age in baseball. So he's just remained a close friend. Sahil was he was a high school age athlete. Maybe he might've been a freshman or sophomore at Stanford at the time who attended my wedding, and his parents were at my wedding. And so he was a unique kind of client who trended closer to a friend than a client from pretty early on. And he treated Eric and I like mentors for a long time. And to a degree, he still does. He's been very kind about that. And so we've had a really good relationship there. And then maybe the most interesting, I don't want to call it magnet, but relationship in my world that I don't even know if I've talked to you guys about is that the guy who lived next door to Eric and I, our freshman year, and who is probably my best friend in the world to this day, was the 6th employee at Facebook. And so he's done some things as well. And so I've just been around these type of people intentionally or unintentionally for a long time. Actually, I'm going to say completely unintentionally. I mean, I definitely believe in you being the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with concept, but I guess I just try to be the stupidest person in the room at all times.
And is it just that your gym is a magnet for like what are you doing that just all these people stumble into your gym? Sounds like for a while there that whole block, right? Because Barrett was training with you guys at that block. Like there's just everybody that went on to make these huge. Okay. I played the Twitter growth game for like 6 months, and I remember you mentioning it. That like all those guys ended up building like large presences, and sounded like you just you had lightning in a bottle.
They really figured out how to hack Twitter just like you did at a fairly similar time. I think that this place it's going to be some pretty significant revisionist history if I try and tell you that we had a plan to put a bunch of future influencers in the same place and we're going to incubate this model. But what we did have, which maybe they wouldn't be as quick to acknowledge as I am, is we're in a very affluent part of Massachusetts and part of the country. And these are kids who came from means. I mean, every single person, with the exception of Eric, that I've mentioned thus far, was like private school, country club membership type people. And whether we want to admit it or not, we got a head start on a lot of people, and we had a lot of resources, and we had parents who were pouring into our educations and our athletic endeavors and things like that. So that's a cheat code. I mean, maybe they don't want to say it.
I didn't think this was the reason, but yeah, anything is possible when you have a rich dad, I think is,
what do I tell you, Teo?
John's famous line to me, that's the most, yeah. So I guess, and I would also ask, is it also because not only were you in this kind of affluent part of town, but also you niche down so much, like it's so specialized. So you can, you can talk more about what you offer, but for those who don't know, but it's so specialized, you're so niche down that you can also charge more, and people will go to you for this very, very unique, specialized way of training.
Yeah. So this special way of training, for the audience who don't know me, which is all of you, it's baseball specific strength and conditioning. We have found that small category, realized nobody wanted to claim that little island in the fitness space back in 2000. It was late 2007, early 2008 that we started to realize there was opportunity there. And I think to John's point, part of the reason this young community of now adult influencers originated in this space is because Eric did a really, really good job of capturing first mover advantage in this shoulder health overhead athlete space by publishing a ton of content on the topic early when blogs were in their heyday. He was a pretty prolific content creator on T Nation, which was a really big deal back at that point in time. And he was, I think, kind of a product of that like Ryan Lee online marketing bootcamp kind of vibe back early on. And he just started building a list very early, and these kids couldn't help but see that we were building something special from like a brand awareness in this little fitness bubble space. And it was hard not to realize that it was because we figured out how to optimize kind of our reach on social media and through newsletter, email marketing. Eric was in the game real early on that. And they observed, processed, and took some things away from it, I think. And I would never say they singularly like learned from us and then went off and spread their wings as like tech and finance influencers. But I do think that what they saw Eric and our business as a whole doing influenced them to realize there's a lot of opportunity there. And then they were just very smart about capturing opportunity, like right when it was sitting in their face. They chased it. Like Sahil's story for exploding on Twitter was an example of partially right place, right time, but partially just realizing I can story tell my way into a massive following.
I worked very closely with Chris Cooper for the last 5 or 6 years now. And when you see that, right, or you see this guy who just, punches words into a computer consistently over a long period of time, and you see the result and see the back end of what that produces and how much easier it is to talk to people and sell people and build trust. And it's insane, and can't help but like have a little bit of that rub off on you and be like, oh, if you can make it through the grind, the march, just publishing for no one for 10 years, if you get out the other side, it really is an incredible advantage. And yeah, to your point, there are like these weird blips and periods in time where you can really accelerate it if you find the right platform and you're the right person for it, where you can take that 10 years of nothingness and kind of get the same result in 10 months. And so some of those guys did that, which is awesome. Hopefully, and it sounds like they are milking it for all it's worth.
Yeah, and it's fun to watch them pivoting right now because the Twitter things. I mean, I don't remember the last time anyone was super fired up about a thread. Yeah, exactly. But they have. I think that they were smart about identifying that shift in the winds. And Sahil just started to lean real hard into building his email list. And He stacked his Instagram content pretty effectively. He bought a bunch of basically any service provider he worked with to amplify his message on these platforms. He just bought them. He just put them under his umbrella and just said, "Oh, you're the video production guys. I like the work you've done for me. I want this now. Come on in." And so now he's just kind of like, he owns the machine, and it's just compounding, and the audience has grown very quickly in advance of that book I mentioned, and he's going to come out of the gate real hot because of it.
Our newsletter this morning is about acqui-hiring, so glad someone smart is doing it. So, we talked about how you are home to a bunch of successful people, and we cracked the code. The secret is a rich dad. So go out and get yourself one. I wish we had a sponsor. If anybody is, giving out rich dads or rich dad as a service, hit us up. We would love to work with you.
Yeah, I'm ready to write a check too toward that cause. I'd like to see that scale. Get me in the rich dad game.
And let's talk about your business, because a lot of people who are unfamiliar with the sports performance game will see like Cressey Sports Performance, all these professional athletes. We talked about how you got a bunch of successful entrepreneurs in there now, and be like, oh, I want that. That looks like an amazing business. And Teo and I, who fancy ourselves men of marketing men, we don't like your business very much. It's very difficult to try and, you have to talk to a lot of people. You have a lot of different avatars. When we talk to people who do similar stuff to what you do, it's always like a 3-hour conversation. Why is that?
Can I start by saying I don't always like my business that much either? I mean, when I started this business, John,
your business model, I think it sounds very sexy, but in reality is less sexy than it is.
Because everyone wants to train high level athletes. Everyone wants to train pros. But should we all want to be training pros, Pete?
Yeah, I mean,
should you want to be the baseball guy?
Less than 10% of our revenue here in Massachusetts will be generated by professional athletes this year.
What about Florida, though?
Florida is probably closer to 60 or 70%.
I heard your Florida gym's like a ATM, like it's literally a money tree. That's what rumor on the street is.
These days, that's not terribly inaccurate, but that's because you can charge wild rates to guys who are on 40-man rosters, is what you'd call them in basically major leaguers, making league minimum, which is probably in the vicinity of $800K a year, just to put the uniform on and not play. So these guys certainly have means, and they're willing to pay a premium for access to a premium footprint at times where we're not going to overpopulate space on them. Like, for example, we don't really put interns on the training floor when that population is in the gym. It's like all hands, full-time staff, the best of the best that we have, and which is in alignment with what those guys pay.
Which is what? What does something like that cost? If I'm a
lot of those guys are probably spending in excess of $2,000 a month.
If I'm a young rich dad, if I'm an up and coming rich dad,
they're spending in excess of $2,000 a month for what is ultimately a semi-private model. They're in a 5-to-1 client to coach ratio dynamic, but the other 4 athletes standing alongside them are all the ones that are on TV with them every night for 8 months of the year. And so they're tolerant of not being personal trained because they're surrounded by similarly elite earners and competitors.
But you guys train like hundreds of them, right?
Yeah, I'd say we saw probably between 70 and 100 big leaguers this offseason, which means we have in the vicinity of 3 from every single roster in the league in the gym 6 days a week. But we do, then there might be in excess of 100 minor leaguers who are in the gym, people who've never seen the big leagues, but are technically professional athletes. And then there's a lot of revenue driven by one-time consults. So people who fly in for these abbreviated stints, get screened by Eric, get a program designed based on his findings, and then go along on their way and execute at a gym closer to home. And then in monthly installments, we get them new material. And it doesn't take more than one assessment for a given off season to do that properly. Screen them on the front end, write their program, have a call at the end of each month, talk about where you're at, how you're feeling. Here's your next month of material. Let me know if you have questions. Let me know if you need to modify it because of equipment selection or anything like that. And on occasion, guys will do like an entry and an exit screening. Like you might have a guy who comes back in for a kind of touch point to see where they landed at the end of an off season before they get to spring training. But I'd say that's not the norm. So it's like a single visit and then monetize them remotely for 4 to 6 months.
Eric still sells his time. Like you can buy a consultation with Eric.
Yeah, but it's stupidly expensive for what it is. Like how much time you really get with Eric. And the other thing is the people that he does it with are people he'd do it for free with anyway, because he is on a mission to just own the league as far as being able to claim clientele all over the place. And so if there's a big leaguer, someone who was in the league this year, saw service time, who wants to see Eric's going to find time for him. He's hungry for the most stacked client roster in our industry. That's for sure.
And what does a consult with Eric Cressey run?
If it was up here in Massachusetts, it would cost you $1,000 to come in here and spend somewhere between 45 and 75 minutes with him, and then work with a number of our staff members in conjunction with that, delivering kind of the training experience on the back end of that screening.
I thought you were going to say a way higher number. The way you framed it, I was I
just mean compared to what it costs to train with us, just for the regular person off the street. That assessment might be pushing close to 10x.
Got it. Okay. Because that sounds pretty reasonable for someone, it's like a lot of these guys on intro, like 15 minutes of Sahil's time on intro, I think is like $1,000. So
that's bullshit. I'll make Sahil take a call from you this afternoon for free.
I was going to say, we can just pay $1,000. We can get Eric on the show. That's not bad.
Yeah,
we can do that.
My new business mentor, Eric Cressey, is just going to be moving my out. We're just going to have him on the podcast every week, but I'm just going to be like,
yeah, real-time screenings is perfect. We're going to check your active and passive motion, whatever the hell that shit means that I sell but don't understand.
Awesome. Yeah, I get a 75-minute podcast with Cressey for $1,000. That's great.
No, but it really, if we do 3 or 4 of those a day during the summer when he's home, that's meaningful money for a brick and mortar fitness business like this, and then monetize them for a couple $100 a month, kind of in perpetuity. It's still good value for them and us. So, and he loves it. Like he's never going to stop coaching. I mean, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I'd come down and go out on that piece of shit boat you sold Mateo that was sinking and hang out and go on vacation.
It was not sinking. It was a lot of things, but it was not sinking.
It works. Guys,
my point is I'd hang up the cleats metaphorically, and I would go on my retirement tour if I won the lottery tomorrow. Eric could become Elon Musk, and he's going to work every day until the last day. And it's just, he loves this shit. So
that's because he's never been on the Gator Done. He's never been on. He hasn't tasted.
Well, didn't you say he was the only one without a rich dad?
He was.
He just needs a rich dad. That's how we slow him down. We just got to have a rich dad.
Yeah.
So
nothing replaces the real thing.
But Eric and I, one of the things we had in common was that we both had small family business that we grew up in. So his family was not by any means poor, but they were middle class, upper middle class, and he owned a Thomas school bus distribution company. And so basically in southern Maine, he was the place to go for local school districts to get their buses or get them refurbished or whatever it is. And I know that sounds glamorous, but it's still very much a mom and pop little family operation. So Eric and his brother, they helped Dad out cleaning buses that were getting ready to get turned and shipped off to a new district or wherever it may be. I remember when we first started this business, his brother was driving buses to God knows where in Maine to drop them off and then taking rental cars back. And they were all hustling just to keep this thing moving. And what Eric learned was that if a call comes in at an unfortunate time on like a holiday weekend or something like that, and it impacts the business, he's going to drop what he's doing and he's just going to get that shit done, because that's what entrepreneurship is. And I grew up in a similar dynamic. My family business was home heating oil. And so if somebody's like boiler exploded on Christmas Eve, and my dad didn't have guys on call, my dad was going to just drop what he was doing and go do that at some unreasonable time. And that was normal to me. And Eric and I both attribute our success early to just having been brought up in that world and having just that was the mindset going into starting this thing, which is why we work 7 days a week for years without hesitation or even second guessing it. And so I don't want to pretend that Eric was like living in the slums. They had a very nice home. He went to a nice college, I assume with the help of his parents. His dad ran a very healthy business until the day he died, and they did fine, but he wasn't country club membership type rich. He was just small family business schooled entrepreneur with the right kind of hustle. And that's why we won a lot early, because we were just ready to chase harder than the startup. I mean, Orange Theory didn't exist then, but things like that were popping up all over our market, and none of them made it. None of the businesses that were here early when we started are still playing the game.
So the last time you and Eric were in the same room together with Mateo and I was in Miami. And I remember thinking like, my impression of Eric was like, this guy's intense. Like it would be difficult to work for this dude. And it was very apparent he was on all the time. And my impression was like business comes first, like over everything. And then, maybe I'm dealing with Pete Dupuis, the elder statesman, but you do not come off as that way. You are hard to get in touch with. You are not quick on the draw for emails. You seem to have a very tight boundaries around when is work time and when is family time. Is this something that has just changed over time, or how does the dynamic work between the two of you? Like, is he just yelling at you for, not pulling the sled hard enough? Like what's going on there?
That is a great question. Can we start by acknowledging how timely I was in my text message response this week as we scheduled this? I thought I did a really good job.
Everyone knows Pete Dupuis a clout chaser. He's come on, Jim Worldwide. You're going to get some follows.
But nobody. I didn't even need the nudge. That was record response time. I know you know how to play the game with me, and you are very good at needling at my lack of punctuality in some of my responses. And I was expecting it, so I beat you to it this time. But to your question,
peer pressure means you have friends.
Exactly. That's a good point. I'm going to put that on the internet. Great question. I believe that the version of me today is pretty similarly in line with a version you might have met 15 years ago, pre-spouse, pre-kids, early stage business here. I was definitely putting in more hours in the operation back then, like any early startup entrepreneur. But I do think I've always had a much healthier work-life balance than Eric, and I'd be more than comfortable saying that to his face or having him in this digital room right now, and he'd agree. I think that Eric counts on me to kind of stay on brand with that, because I help bring him balance. Does that make sense? Like, I think he has never had a problem with it. Eric's never called me on my work ethic once, not one single time. Part of this is because if you want to find out if you're capable of starting a business with someone and working with them multiple days a week for God knows how many hours a day, there's very few better ways to do it than to get forced into a dorm room with them as a 17 or 18-year-old and learn how to live outside of your parents' house and realize, like, the world I grew up in is not the real world, and there are other people out here who live different ways. Well, we did that. We had that challenging stage in life, and we were in a forced triple. Like, my room was supposed to be a double, and they put a guy named Jean-Pierre from Dubai in our room. And Jean-Pierre, you want to talk about a different culture. That guy came from a different world. And you want to talk about how bad Eric and I have dropped the ball on some opportunities over the years. I remember Jean-Pierre told us, like, guys, Dubai is going to be the craziest shit you've ever seen. It's on the up and up. And we were like, yeah, you're full of shit. All there is a hotel shaped like a sailboat. and he's like, no, I'm telling you. And we were like, okay, big guy. Dubai's a little different today than it was back then. And he told me it was coming. And Eric and I laughed that one off. But we lived with that guy for from September through May, 99 into 2000. And we just saw how the other one lived. We saw each other when we were stressed. We saw each other when we were happy. We had like freshman year of college is some life experience shit. And we did it together. So when it came time to work, it wasn't like he was getting this surprise version of me. He saw how I handled myself in high intensity academic settings, which can translate to some of the experience of early stage startup. And so there was no surprises there. We were fully vetted. Now, I'll tell you that there were moments earlier in our kind of business career where I butted heads with his spouse a fair amount because she saw how hard he worked, and it was off-putting to her to feel like I wasn't pushing the sled as fast as you put it, John. And that created some serious tension between she and I. And at the time, she was an optometrist up here in Massachusetts. But when we opened our Florida facility in 2014, I think it was kind of maybe difficult or a lot of red tape to get over for her to get licensed in optometry down there. Or maybe she just wasn't chasing it because they were starting the gym and she could be an extra set of hands helping with that. But somewhere along the line, she didn't choose to be an optometrist down there. And she basically slid into my role in the Florida facility. She was like the business director. And my God, did her tune toward me change dramatically very quickly in the 12 to 18 months after getting into that. And I think she realized I could be a pretty useful resource to her and we could play nice, and we shared a lot of the same headaches, and it changed the whole dynamic in our relationship. And she stopped questioning my output in relation to her husband's, and we became like a really good team since that time now, which is coming up on 10 years. But early on, that's the only time Pete's hard lines on work-life balance manifested itself in a way that I felt it in the workplace from frustration from others.
So it just sounds like he knew what he was getting himself into because you guys lived together when you were in college.
Yeah. And I would love to, if Eric was still here, I mean, he's only here for like 8 weeks this summer. It's more like he vacations in Massachusetts and has a really kick-ass gym that he trains at. And he'll coach a little bit. He'll do some assessments, but this is more like a place for his kids to come up and see the Northeast for the summer and them experience something a little different. If he were here full time, I'd be all over his case to pick up a hobby. You know, he played soccer in high school. I'd make him come out and play for my men's team with me. I would force him to live that life with me, because since 2014, when he went to Florida, we've found systems in this business. We've built something that can kind of run itself without us in it if we needed to for a period. And this lifestyle that I have now has set in since he left. And so I couldn't have been a guide to him in that sense, because we were still building until the minute they went. And so he and I have not lived in the same state for a long time. And since he left, I've got even better at this, like family, marriage, then business, in that order. And I think I could be helpful to him in finding some stability in that if we were like geographically, physically closer to each other, but we're not. And I think he is better at it now than he was even when you were with him 2 springs ago in Miami. I think he is, with each passing day, becoming a little bit more at ease at booking the occasional vacation and stepping away from the email account. It takes time though.
Yeah, I don't want you to spew this stuff to Teo, get any ideas. If he moves out of state, he'll have more balance. Like that's not the message we want for listeners.
The
I can
wheels
build some
are
office space for you.
Turning. They are turning right now.
I think Teo needs to stay in Florida and I need to go to Massachusetts.
Yeah, you'll really enjoy the weather, John.
Yeah, I know.
You'll love the politics too. It's just like
not
Florida.
A good culture fit. I wanted to go back to the question I originally asked 20 minutes ago that we were trying to answer.
What was that?
I asked him, like, what is difficult about the model? What makes the model
more
so
unsexy in practice? About that. So I was about to say
we
that.
talked about Florida, and then I needed to get the Florida numbers because that's we're always hunting for a headline here on Gym World. We're always looking for a juicy headline.
So I want to go back to John's earlier comment, which was we hate, from a marketing perspective, your model. And I guess I wanted to kind of just clarify that, like in talking to other sports performance gyms, gyms that specialize in, youth athletics or baseball or soccer or whatever it is, hockey. It sounds like from a lot of these gym owners, yes, they specialize in a certain sport specific thing, but especially in the event where they're training like athletes, it's seasonal, right? So you have to kind of inject these other ancillary programs to keep the business afloat during the off seasons, during when kids are away, or whatever it is. So while yes, you are able to niche down and charge a lot, you still have to introduce these other things, right? You also have to offer general fitness for Gen Pop. You also have to do like boot camps. And so, that can be confusing from a marketing perspective. Like, what do you put on your website when yes, we specialize in this thing. That's very important, but we also do these other things too. And that's also important. So that can be kind of complicated. And I think that's where John's comment was coming from. So I guess, what are the things you guys have offered, and have you changed the way in which you approach your niche, who you're going after, in order to make things a little bit more streamlined?
You guys are totally right. I mean, it's a real headache. There is not a lot of annual recurring revenue in this space. Let me tell you about a September afternoon in 2007. So we are 2 months into starting the business. I pull an all hands meeting, for lack of a better term, me, Eric, and our business partner, Tony Gentlecore, who left the operation in around 2014 on great terms. I grabbed both of them at the end of a work week on a Friday, and I said, guys, I need help. We have a huge problem. We're being pigeonholed as the baseball gym, and the football guys won't take us seriously. The lacrosse people are sure as shit not coming to this gym. We need help. I need your wisdom. And I was basically begging for their assistance in getting us back to world-class generalist status. And thankfully, in that moment, Eric was like, well, let me ask you a question. Who is the NFL combine guy? And I'd say, I guess at the time it was Athletes Performance, now known as Exos. I'd say, I guess it's Athletes Performance. And I guess Boyle does a little bit of that. And I guess Joe DeFranco does that. And he says, okay, cool. Yeah, I agree. Who's golf? I said, TPI. Okay. Who's baseball? And I was like, I don't have a clue. And he's like, exactly. I say, we only talk about that. The rest will figure itself out, but let's get on message with that. And that was an inflection point in my life and my career. Like, that conversation was the moment that I was long-term going to have anything meaningful to share with anyone in our industry, or stand in front of a room and give a lecture. Had that not happened, I'd just be one of thousands upon thousands of world-class generalists. And I might have some ideas on how to build a team and build out a little bit of a social media strategy for a gym. But that was the beginning of our relevance. And from that point forward, instead of asking ourselves, like, how are we going to keep these alternative revenue streams busy enough so that when everybody goes in season, we've got a tiny bit of cash flow, we didn't ever have that conversation. We said, hey, if we're talking to anyone, we're talking about baseball. If we're going to put out social media content, it's going to be on that athletic population. If Eric's going to write a blog, it's going to be on that topic. If we're going to stand in front of a big audience, we're going to talk about that. We are going to be so offensively on message with that we're going to live and die with it. And I just learned that if you're presumed to be world-class in one category, you're assumed to be far, far, far above average in all the rest. And it still generates Gen Pop leads. So I just constantly get these sales pitch opportunities where someone like Mateo calls and they said, hey, Pete, I know you guys are the baseball guys, but my son Rose Crew, can you help him out? And I know how to give all those sales, because the reality is, as much as we position ourselves as selling baseball specific training material, we're selling athlete specific training material. And the fact that they play baseball is one of the categories on the checklist that we're looking at during the screening process. And so it influences the direction, but it is not the entirety of the direction. And so I know how to give that pitch in my sleep, but I just needed to trust him when Eric said, let's trust this approach and let's just lean into that reputation and see what happens. And it worked out. And with that in mind, I'll tell you that the scary things that you guys don't like about our business are scary for a reason, because they're super legit. Like, I did not take an April paycheck. I haven't taken an April paycheck in 18 years. I run like a 10 and a half months a year payroll for ownership. And But on the flip side of that, I also know that we're going to collect upwards of 20% of our revenue for the year between June 1st and 5th. Like we're going to run a summer program that's going to print cash for us. And because of these almost 2 decades of familiarity with the cadence of this foot traffic, that doesn't scare me like it would others, but it makes us really difficult to market for. And I totally understand that. Does that answer your question, Matteo?
It did answer a good chunk of it. Yes.
We made it. We made it. 46 minutes. We got the answer. And so here, let me unpack that for the listener. So if you work with a sports performance gym, typically what we'll see on their site is, hey, whatever the sport is they're known for, they'll have some information about that. Then they'll have some general athlete program that is, hey, we train some rowers and we train some softball players too, so we need to have a page about that. It's like, okay, well, what do you do with them? Well, it's like we have personal training, we have semi-private training, we have group, and then we have team training. So we need to have information on all of those things. It's like, okay. And then it's like, all right, then we also have this fitness program for people who are not athletes. It's like, okay, what's the fitness program? Well, we have the personal training, we have the semi-private training. We run these 2 separate challenges. And then we also have like a group boot camp.
But my operation, I have 2 services. We have semi-private training for everyone, and we run a strength camp in the mornings.
No, this is no longer about you, Pete. This
is a sports-specific genre.
Because I already told you the guy making $35 million a year is going to get the same semi-private training offering. We'll charge him more, but he's going to have the same training experience. So it makes the sales component of what we do a lot easier, because I'm not selling 50 price points and 50 service offerings. I'm selling 2.
We know that. That's why you're on the show. That's why you're on the show. That's why you're the
guru.
Yeah, we know that.
That is why you are on the edge of the small business revolution. But yeah,
I'm glad we got that reference out there.
I'm saying, as a whole, when we look at these sports performance training websites, it's very hard because they're thinking in terms of multiple avatars. What you said, which is important, is like we position ourselves as the baseball people, and then the other people come to us anyway. And one of the things that we talk about a lot in this show is positioning. And so we talk about ways that general Gen Pop gyms can change their positioning to be the right choice for a certain type of people in their market. Right. And you mentioned this program that is going to make you 20% of your revenue in 1 week. And, up until this point in the show, you've talked like, I am the baseball gym. I'm the baseball gym. But I know that this program that you were talking about, you've honed in on your positioning a lot more to actually, like, what was it, double or triple the revenue of this program?
Yeah, that was what I was trying to tease out.
Yeah, well, some of that is increased price points.
Sure, but a lot of it, like you gave a whole presentation on the positioning. Mm-hmm. And so maybe talk about how getting more specific than just like the baseball gym made it so you can take a June paycheck that is thick with 3 C's.
Well, and you niche down again, right? This is another level of niching down too.
Yeah, this is an exercise in showing you just how far you can lean into this. I say niche, you say niche. We can argue about that another time.
You say Dupuis, I say Dupuis. So
exactly.
Whatever.
I just know how inauthentic it sounds when I say niche after calling it a niche multiple times on this. This is showing you how far you can go with that. So initially it was, well, what's our niche? Oh, it's baseball. But if I'm being honest, I would say of the 85% of our clients are baseball players. And I would say in excess of 92 to 95% of them are pitchers. And so as much as we position ourselves as the baseball gym, I don't have a lot of hitters here. I don't have a lot of utility infielders. Our Florida space more so because we have fields and batting cages there. But here in Massachusetts, which is the flagship that's been running for close to 2 decades, it's really a pitcher gym. And then you could go even further there. We could be just the gym that helps guys recover from Tommy John procedures. We could be just the gym that helps left-handed pitchers who throw from a unique arm slot. You can actually build out that business. That model can exist in this day and age thanks to the internet. And so that presentation was partially an exercise in just how much specificity you can go to in picking out your audience and the summer program we're talking about, we realized early on we were chasing the highest profile guys, like the Power 5 conference guys, so the ones who might show up on ESPN. But there's thousands upon thousands of other college baseball players who don't ever get that type of clout. And all of them have spending power. And they also haven't been told for years and years and years that they're destined for professional baseball. And we realized, like, let's stop chasing the guys who aren't that interested in us taking them from, I mean, they'd like to add a mile per hour or two to their fastball, but their ceiling, their window of growth opportunity is so much tighter than the D3 kid who's an 81 to 83 mile per hour arm and has never had any quality structured training and hasn't had anyone talk to them about their nutrition, and they're going to a school that doesn't have any resources to throw at that. We can bring them in, and the results they get are so amplified by comparison. We're not squeezing blood from a stone with those guys. We can bring in a kid and give them 6 or 7 miles per hour velo in a 10-week program just because they get better in their mechanics, they get better in their lifestyle habits, they just get better. And that sells infinitely faster than this kid from Mississippi State trusted us last summer, and we took him from 94 to 95.3, and he said he had a good experience. And so we decided to niche down in how we talk to these athletes and just chase New England-based Division III athletes. And specifically, we chased relationships with coaches in those demos and started getting 2 and 3 athletes from certain rosters here and there. And I haven't made any effort to position us as a gym for Division I arms. And now in excess of 50% of the registrations, the deposits we have are Division I arms that we weren't trying to speak to. And so the more I think I've figured this shit out, the more I realize I don't know anything at all. But you're right. The degree of detail we've gone into it, taking just a relationship based approach to building this program, and a lot more like one-on-one selling and reaching out, like basically mapping out rosters and identifying hometowns and then networking our way into conversations. It has just turned into really, really strong enrollment, which is a nice, pleasant change. But we're not going to have like the sexiest, biggest names on our Instagram this summer because they're a bunch of no names who just want to get better. And like I told you, Eric wants to accumulate high profile names, and he should, because we've got the facility to accommodate it down there, and it works for us. I want the opposite up here. I want the guys who are going to grind, and the guys who are just like the blue collar strength and conditioning gym. Like that's kind of internally how we talk about this. CSP Mass is the blue collar S&C facility under this umbrella. CSP Florida is the white collar one.
You should position your gym as the place. No rich dads. That should be your tagline. That's who you're targeting.
No rich dads. No, ours is like bring your Amex. Pete's ready to sell.
Bring your Amex, not your dad's. That's not
your dad's. Yeah.
This is like a $10,000 program, right?
Oh no. Like $4,000 is what these guys will spend in the summer. But in Florida, we run a close to $10,000 iteration in Florida.
Okay. 10,000. Okay. For 10 weeks. So like $1,000 a week.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And it's like group, right? You run like a lot of people through this, right?
So the most we've ever had is 50 bodies, 47 or something like that. But we'll do around $150,000 in revenue just from that program, just to start day one. And then that doesn't include just the traditional monthly revenue at a time that's a busy time for us. So it's a pretty big boon for us. In Florida, the program is so much more expensive because we have a motion capture software down there that we don't have up here, that is really time consuming to set up and break down the data and present it in a format that makes sense to these kids. And so our capacity down there is probably 25 to 40% of what it is up here, because we just don't have the time, energy, or resources to support that. So we just price it in a way that we can't overpopulate it.
So you said something powerful again, which, we're 54 minutes in, we're starting to get to what we want to talk about in the show. So when we were talking about the positioning for your website, you said, hey, don't talk about 50 different things. We're the baseball people. And as a result of being the best baseball people, we get other people. And then when you talk about this program that you make a big chunk of your revenue from, said, hey, we're not catering to the D1 athletes that everybody else is trying to cater to. We're trying to cater to, the D3 guy or the community college guy who wants to get into a D1 program. And as a result, on focusing on that, just somehow magically these D1 people were like, wanted to sign up.
If you want my honest answer to why that's happening right now, I think we are coming across as much less like desperate for their business.
The Abercrombie approach.
We're going back in time a couple decades, or the current Abercrombie.
Well, when Pete's on, we got to take the shirt off. So we're talking old Abercrombie, shirts off, acting real cool. Like, I don't need you in the store.
Hey, when I peaked, like when Abercrombie peaked, I was the target demo. I was that age range. I spent some money at Abercrombie back in the day. I'm not going to lie.
So you just get every time you get more specific, you make more money, and you end up getting more of the people that, you wanted to talk to anyway on your website on that 15th page.
Yep.
And so in your presentation, you actually gave like an exercise, and I thought the exercise was pretty powerful. Are you want to run through it real quick? I'll pull up the slides so you can see what you said here.
You have my slides more accessible than I do right now. So a lot of this was driven.
Hey, this is a professional operation here. This is I believe in the small business revolution. We prepare for this thing, even though it doesn't sound like it.
Beautiful. All right. So good. We have a visual. Thanks.
All right. Why don't you walk Teo and I through it? Because we talk about positioning for Kilo all the time, and maybe you can coach us, help us become a better company, help us nail down our positioning as the positioning expert.
I appreciate the opportunity. I'm a big positioning enthusiast like yourselves. I like to read about it. I read the maybe 70s or 80s classic Positioning as my initial jump into this, which I think was it Reese and Trout? Maybe, do you know? A lot of this was inspired by a recent book by April Dunford. April was, there we go. So she's known first for Obviously Awesome, which was pretty much about positioning, but she wrote a book called Sales Pitch, which was basically just building off of this concept of positioning as well. And this exercise is kind of a hybrid of her version that I had the audience work through. And so I want to go back to that visual so I can see what I asked you to do. There was a piece on that first one that I really liked. One of the most interesting things that I took away from that book was this concept that we don't look at status quo as a competitive alternative, and some significant percentage of sales decisions end in I'm not doing anything at all. And it was a wild number. It was, I don't know, like 40 to 60% or something like that. I don't have it memorized anymore because this presentation was a couple months back. But it was a number that kind of blew my mind because of all the times I ever thought about who our competition was. I never thought do nothing was an option. And it's changed the way that I've talked about our service, and it changes the way that you go through your sales methodology if you realize that it's not the biggest competitor that is the most likely outcome. It's neither of you. And it changes the way you think about this. But what I had the room do was just list your competitive alternatives. I wanted anywhere from 3 to 6 as fast as possible. Because we all know, like if I asked you guys, we'll say off the record, I won't make you talk about your competitors on your podcast in real time. But if I asked you to list the names of the 3 companies who are doing what you're doing and you're competing with right now, you both would list. If I asked you to list 4, you'd overlap on at least 3 of them, right?
We'd overlap. If you had us list 6, we'd overlap on 6 of them.
There you go. And so everyone in the room could have done that in their respective market. All gym owners from all over the country, they could have listed them. And so we listed those quick and dirty. And then next we got into that was a 90-second exercise. Put those on paper. And then I said, all right, now I want you to list your unique attributes. So for us, CSP, those unique attributes are there's a lot of things that I could put. Their culture and community. In Florida, they're actually real estate. We have fields. We have access to things that other gyms don't have. They can be technology, but technology isn't terribly defensible, because if you got $20,000, you can buy a TrackMan camera that match the tech that we have in our gym for pitching instruction. So it usually has to be your people and your unique knowledge and expertise. For us, that's shoulder and elbow health. But I had everybody list what they perceive to be their unique attributes within their respective market. On to the next one here. You guys didn't let me review my slides before we did this. Fact-based value and proof plays. So we got into, I asked them to list 3 examples of effectively social proof. So for us, coming back to this summer program we talked about, we could say that with 7 years of results and in excess of 200 athletes coming through the doors, we have averaged an increase of 4.6 miles per hour in velocity added over the course of this 10-week program. And those metrics don't lie, numbers don't lie. And so I was trying to make sure the room realized that they should be positioning against, hierarchical data that they can basically point at and not have somebody raise their hand and be like, bullshit. Like we had a gym in our market that listed themselves as, I'm not going to use the same town because that might piss them off because it's very clear to them, but we're in Hudson, and their whole marketing angle was Hudson's strongest gym, which is just bullshit. It's like, well, that's a self-declared thing, but it's not a unique positioning strategy that's like defensible in my mind. So I asked people to make this list. There are 3 examples of that. And then last, we got into their target market characteristics. This is challenging for a lot of the generalist gym owners because they haven't spent enough time identifying their avatar. They just, their avatar is like anyone who has money in their pocket and wants to give it to us. And that's fine. I definitely take that approach. Like, all business is welcome in my space, but I need to understand who I want to talk to the most and what their characteristics are. So target market characteristics in the community we are working with is athletes my avatar is 15 to 20-year-old athlete who plays multiple sports but identifies primarily as a baseball player if asked to pick one. They have basically an interest in reducing injury risk, but mostly what they want to do is be a more explosive athlete. And the characteristics of that community is it's more than what just comes into my gym. Like, I understand their competitive calendar. I understand the tournament schedules for these kids, the recruiting efforts, the combines that they attend. Their characteristics are pretty easy for me to map after all this time of understanding how their year works and the competing demands on their time. And I put all of that on the list. But the people in the room oftentimes could not tell us what Mark refers to as Mrs. Rossini. Have you guys done the Mrs. Rossini game on Gym World, where he explains exactly what that woman looks like? And that's who he's talking about. And she is the target market. I think it comes down to the fact you haven't. John, you know who Mrs. Rossini is, right?
She sounds great.
I've heard Mark go into.
I can't do it. I can't do it at the service of Ken. We gave a lecture in Rhode Island to Perform Better last weekend, and I did a lecture on design, like really nailing down your avatar. And Mark was not in the room for a lot of it. He was taking a call, and he came back into the room, and unprompted, I called him out and I said, Mark, please explain Mrs. Rossini. And he did like 5 consecutive minutes of wildly descriptive, specific things about her, but she is their avatar. And you need to kind of be able to refer to that and know what they are. Here we call it Johnny Baseball. Johnny Baseball is all of those things I listed. And Johnny Baseball shares a lot of characteristics that make it in this top 5. So I asked everybody to go through that. The people in the room who have a pretty firm avatar nailed down did this in like 20 seconds. And then the rest of the people were like, I can't do this in the next 90 seconds. This is like that's bullshit. Our market's everything. It's everywhere. It's all the people. And so some people struggled more than others. What's the last slide? The ones with
the most nailed down one, the richest? Did they happen to be the most successful gyms?
That angle can work if you're in a certain market. Just most of the people in that room are in not urban settings. You know, as much as we're all learning from Mark Fisher in this community, Mark Fisher Fitness, the realities of the operation that Fisher and Keeler run are not in line with the rest of the people in the room. I mean, I remember I had a conversation with their colleague, Brian Patrick Murphy, who was one of the founders years back. And I was like, hey, out of curiosity, what's your payroll look like? And he's like, oh, it's just a shade under 70% of our top line. And I was like, 70? And then it was like, they're paying Manhattan rent. They have this massive team. And I realized like everything I get from them, as far as it relates to like metrics and managing our kind of dashboard of KPI, I've got to take it with a grain of salt because they function in a different world than we do. And so the average gym owner in the community that we work with isn't a brick and mortar facility that has a hyper specific niche like me, but they are in a fairly rural setting in the suburbs of America, if that makes sense. And very few of them have not very few of them in that community. They've all gone through the mechanics of doing a nice job of hammering down their avatar, but very rarely do we have somebody join the community, probably like the Two Brains community, where they come in and you say, hey, in the next 90 seconds, give me the most descriptive answer to what your avatar is. Go. Very few of them come in and have labeled their avatar the way we're talking about. Yeah. Does that resonate?
Definitely. And I think that's one of the biggest for CrossFit gyms specifically, and operating in 2024 versus the heyday when we did and everything was just on easy mode. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that most of the gyms are making now. They just refuse to get tighter on their positioning, because there's so many ways that you can take the CrossFit methodology and make it more appealing for specific avatars. So, the guy just out of college who just wants to compete and take his shirt off and grunt, like there can be a gym that exists that caters to those people. One that's specific to your boutique mom, Mrs. Rossini. There can be a CrossFit that caters specifically to that type of person. You can do it in a more intimate setting, and you can offer the same benefits of that type of group training, but in a smaller environment, and you can angle it at people with like injuries. So guys like me who've hurt their back or elbow or knee, and then you can make it positioned for those type of people who, like elements of that methodology, but don't want to injure themselves or are afraid of doing it in a large group setting. You can do it for like a older population. So like Halen's positioning, where 55 plus, and you can, position yourself as doing functional fitness for that age. And there's a different angle there. And all of those would, I think, do better, or it would take a lot of sales friction out of the process versus someone who's like, or anyone who's between 20 and 60 and has money is our avatar.
And it's not costing you business from the rest of the people who don't have the knee injury you were talking about or anything like that. To give some context to why we did this quick and dirty positioning exercise, this specific weekend was focused on marketing. And I was the first lecturer of a 2-day event. And what I asked them to do was put all those categories on paper, those 3 to 5 answers for those 4 or 5 different exercises. And what I told them was, I want that handwritten sheet in your line of sight for the rest of the weekend. So when John Franklin gets on stage to talk to you about your marketing strategy in a couple of hours, I want you to read that sheet from start to finish and remind yourself about who this information you're about to consume is going to be delivered to, so that you stay on message. Because people just aren't singularly focused about who they're trying to deliver and package this wisdom and deliver it to. And that's where we go off the rails with the kind of optimizing these efforts that we put in for speaking to our audience. And so I just wanted people to revisit that 8 times over 2 days, read it to yourself, make sure you remember it. Because I personally, I might read a book and say, that didn't speak to me at all. An example, I read, I think it was called Rework years back. And I was like, this book sucks. It's not doing it for me. And then maybe 2 years later, staff was like, we really need to do a book club. Pete, would you spend on buying a book every month or 2 for the team, and we'll all read and we'll get into it? And I was like, hell yes, I can get behind this initiative. What do you guys want to read first? And they, as a group, voted on Rework. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Fine. That's what people picked. Let's do that. And I pulled it off the shelf and I read it 2 years later, and my God, did it speak to me. It just hit me at the right time. And the information, just, I was in a different stage in like kind of a season of my business, and it just worked for me. But the point is, the information needs, I need to be in a certain mindset when I consume certain stuff. And I wanted to make sure that this audience in that room on that day was in the mindset, I am hyper specific about who's going to win following this weekend based on all the things I learned. And I hope it helped people. I like running the exercise for sure from stage, because it eats 5 minutes real quick. And it's a good way to get people thinking in the direction I want them
to. Do you think that your community can learn more from it than others? You know, I think CrossFit is a little behind on this. And then again, we just pointed our frustration that like a lot of these sports performance gyms, the ones that do really well, are just trying to speak to 5 different people all the time. Like, how do you coach like peer gyms who are struggling with this?
I definitely push people to pick a singular target to have in mind every time they talk, personally, just because I think it's the path of least resistance. We talked about this earlier. I want to make the same amount and work less. That's what I want. And when it comes down to it, I have found this to be just as productive as chasing 5 different things at once. And so for me, this is the most efficient way to spread our business's message. And we don't completely hide from the Gen Pop community. Like, for example, we have a new site that's not with Kilo. I lost that argument. But we have a new site that's going to be live in the next 48 hours. And on it, it's heavy baseball, like really, really heavy baseball. But I layer Gen Pop testimonials in. It's like baseball testimonial, adult, baseball testimonial, parent, baseball testimonial, orthopedic surgeon who trains with us. And so I let that messaging be subtle, but it's there. If you went and you skimmed our site and you go through our homepage, you're going to realize, oh, there are some normal people here. But as far as kind of the services offered and the visuals, it's very baseball heavy. And
so basically you'll instruct people, hey, lean into being the wrestling gym, lean into being the gym for runners, lean into being the volleyball
Only if you're good
gym.
at it, though. I do see this world of people who like threw a dart at a dartboard and were like, oh, there's no wrestling gym on the East Coast. I'll do that. And you're like, okay, well, cool. Tell me about your wrestling career. Like, I didn't wrestle. Well, tell me about the most common injury patterns you see during the screening process with the wrestlers. Well, I don't know yet, but I'll learn that. And I'm like, all right, well, that's bullshit. Authenticity matters. Relevance matters. So you can't just arbitrarily pick the blue ocean that you spotted and declare that you own that now, because you might capture it a little bit early, but you are so vulnerable to disruption from someone who actually knows it. And all you're going to do is show them that there's opportunity there and light that fire for them. And so, like, the reason we became baseball is because Eric destroyed his shoulder playing tennis as a youth athlete and was told that he needed a surgical intervention to fix it. And Eric was like, well, I'm Eric. I'm going to learn a workaround. I'm going to study my face off and figure out what's going on in my shoulder as far as like the kinesiology goes. And I'm going to design training programs, and I'm going to show that surgeon that I don't need that surgery. We are coming up on like 25 years since that diagnosis, and he never had that surgery. And what he did was, one, he figured out the workaround. Then he just published his experiences, and he just talked about what he learned along the way and why it was working for him. And he positioned himself as the shoulder guy. And then it just made sense I remember us having a conversation, him being like, hey, I see there as being 3 ways we can go with this: baseball, swimmers, or volleyball players. I like baseball. Let's do that. And we're like, cool, let's do this. But it made sense. It's logical. So the niche piece, like, yes, lean into it if you got it, but it better be believable why you got it is kind of how I coach that.
Walk it like you talk it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're already over on time, Mr. Pete, and we've got some stuff we can work with. We've delivered some alpha to the Gym World community, so we thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise. If people want to drink more from the fountain of Pete Dupuis, where do they go?
Well, what did you say? I publish sometimes.
Onlyfans.com/
Pete exclamation part.
Yeah, Pete exclamation point.
The small business revolution.
Yeah, exactly. Season 2, episode 6 of the 2017 monster small business revolution. But if you have Hulu, go. I will say that show was actually kind of fun. Like it was interesting. It was entertaining for the first 2 seasons. I watched those. Robert jumped ship on it, and it didn't have the star power anymore after season 2. But that would be funny to watch. But I publish most of my content on Instagram. As you know, my username is Pete_Dupuis, which is a French Canadian name that we've butchered 10 different ways already. And my business is called Cressey Sports Performance. And you know what? As far as podcasting goes, your sometimes co-host Mark Fisher, he and I work together in the business for unicorn space, and I'm on that podcast all the time, mostly with Keeler. And so, like you two being regulars on this one, me and Keeler are the Business for Unicorns podcast regulars. And I always describe myself as like Keeler's Conan, and I'm that Andy guy. I just sit right in the chair consistently next to him. And if we don't have anyone lined
he's
up,
good to kill 5 minutes.
Yeah,
Good to kill
I'll be your guest. Thank you guys for having me. I look forward to the third one when I learn something relevant to share between now and then.
Wow. What an outro. And like that, Gym World, another hour has passed, and we thank you for being here. If you got a little value out of this, if you enjoyed it, it's not free to produce. Costs us money, costs us time. It's hard to get an answer from Pete Dupuis and schedule them. So, be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment. It helps us out. And until next week, know that you're enough and we love you. Goodbye.